Hey friends, happy Thursday. Welcome back to another Cook with Kris. Today we are going to be making chicken piccata together. Ooh, I almost lost my voice there. Chicken piccata is a recipe that it's one of those recipes that we're not, there goes my connection for a second there. Hopefully you guys heard, but chicken piccata is one of those recipes where we're not quite sure the origins of. It's got a very kind of Southern Italian Mediterranean type kind of vibe to it, but it's very similar to scallopini, so it's thinly sliced. So I'm doing chicken, so it's thinly sliced chicken that's been pounded, and we are going to create a really simple pan sauce with some white wine and some chicken stock and some lemon. It is so delicious, very simple, but it's one of those recipes that feels way fancier than it is. So let's go ahead and let's make it together. I'll share with you the ingredients I'm going to use. I've got a whole bunch in front of me, and I'll teach you a couple techniques along the way. And as always, I will always share the recipe to my stories afterwards, and if you guys can only hang around for a little while, I do my best to post the replay as long as Instagram plays nice to my IGTV after. So let's go ahead and let's make some chicken piccata. So the first thing you're gonna need are 2 to 3 large chicken breasts. I know raw chicken isn't the most fun to look at, it's kind of funky. But first and foremost, the most important thing that you wanna do right away is you want to take your chicken out of any package that it might be in and pat it dry. When your chicken is dry, we're gonna dredge it in some flour or gluten-free flour. When your chicken is dry, it's going to absorb whatever it is you are going to either coat it with, not absorb, but it's gonna more easily take anything that you're going to dredge it in. It's also gonna sear better. So that's true for any meat. You wanna make sure that you pat it really, really dry, way better sear that way. So we've pat it really dry, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and season it really well as I'm chatting with you guys as well. It's always best to season as early as you can before you cook your meat. It takes a little while for the salt to really sink into the meat. So we're just gonna season it a little bit as we wait. I'm just using real salt. You could use kosher salt. Any sort of sea salt is great. So I'm gonna leave that for a second there. The other things we're gonna need, I mentioned that we're gonna dredge in a flour. So my sister is gluten-free, so I'm just using and I'm eating with her tonight. So I'm just using the 1-to-1 gluten-free flour, but white all-purpose flour also works. You can pretty much use any flour you want. We're just dredging today. So we're gonna dredge in a flour. We need some more salt and a little bit of pepper if you prefer. If you don't want pepper, that's great, but at least some salt and some pepper to dredge the chicken in. We're also going to need the juice of at least 1 large lemon and then another lemon sliced thin, which we'll do in just a couple minutes. So juice of 1 lemon sliced thin. This is optional, but I love using 1/2 to 1 shallot. This was a really large shallot, so I just chopped up a half, just chopped into small pieces, and 4 garlic cloves. You can always do more or less depending on your preference for garlic, but I love it. So got some garlic cloves there. Capers are one of the main ingredients. So you want a good amount of capers. So we're gonna use about 1/4 cup of capers, some chicken stock or broth. I love using homemade, but I haven't had homemade in a few weeks now, so we're using this. Wine, also optional. You could also deglaze with a little bit of extra lemon juice. It will make it a little bit lemony, but I'm just using a white wine. And by the way, whenever you use wine in cooking, you want it to be something that you would actually drink. So you don't want to use like the cheapest wine possible. You don't have to use the most expensive wine, but you want to use something that you would actually drink. And this is just a little bit of a dry farm wines that we didn't finish on Easter that's left over. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's something that you would want to drink. And then for searing, you want butter and oil. So some sort of neutral oil. I like using avocado oil. Olive oil would work as well. The combination of butter and oil helps to increase the smoke point of the butter, so there's less likelihood that the butter is going to brown, which is not the effect we're going for here. We don't want the butter to turn bitter. We want it to taste like butter, so half butter, half oil. And last but not least, just a little bit of parsley to garnish at the end. Optional, but a delicious addition. And I love serving this with pasta, but you could serve it with, well, I guess orzo is a pasta as well. But you could serve it with any sort of shape of pasta, orzo, or rice works as well. And then any vegetables you love. But today we're just gonna focus on the chicken piccata. I'm gonna kind of share with you the technique, and we will get into the quick and easy pan sauce. So I want to give you, I'm always here to give you guys more confidence in the kitchen that you can do things that might feel like kind of hard when you see the recipe and you're like, I don't know if I can sear that chicken and create a pan sauce. Super easy. So let's go ahead and do it. So I have a cast iron skillet over here. You don't need a cast iron skillet, but it's my favorite. So if you have it, use it. Some sort of a large saute pan, heavy bottomed is preferred with some sort of a side to it. So basically don't use a crepe pan. So use something that's got some side to it, just because we are going to be searing. And I'm not actually going to turn that on quite yet because it's a cast iron, and cast iron gets quite hot. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with our chicken. I'm just going to start by throwing together the dredging, flour. So I'm going to take about a half of a cup of flour. And we don't need to do exact measurements for dredging, but about a half cup. Just easy to scoop that way. And a good pinch of salt. When I say pinch, I'm talking about probably about a half a teaspoon of salt. You want to make sure it's nice and seasoned. You guys did see me, well, maybe a quarter teaspoon. A half is kind of a lot. I've got a small hand. And just a tiny little bit of pepper. We don't want to make the whole thing taste like pepper because pepper is not the star of this dish. And then I'm just going to whisk it, and we're just going to set that aside while we get the chicken ready. We just want to make sure this is ready to go while we get our chicken ready. So we've got this all ready to dredge. And what we need for the chicken, I told you that we need 2 to 3, depending on how big they are. These are pretty big chicken breasts. You need 2 to 3 chicken breasts. I'm gonna get my shallots and garlic and stuff out of the way. And we are going to take a nice sharp knife, and we are gonna split these chicken breasts in half, okay? So we've got our big old chicken breast here. And all we're gonna do, so this is the knife that I'm going to use, okay? If you have one of these at home, use it. And if you don't, a nice chef's knife works, okay? So this is a meat knife. So all I'm going to do, I've got a little bit of flour on my cutting board, and I'm using a plastic cutting board just because it's a little bit more food safe. And make sure we're always washing our hands in between whenever we're using anything raw, right? And we're just gonna put our hand on top, and you're just going to go through the center of the chicken about halfway, okay? And you're just gonna wanna lift it up as you go a little bit so you can kind of see what you're doing. And you're just gonna slice it. It doesn't need to be perfect. In half until you have 2 fairly even pieces here. And this one's a little bit thinner than this one. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we're just kind of slicing it in half, and I'm gonna set that aside. And I'm gonna do the same thing for my other chicken breast, and then we're gonna put it in a plastic bag. Whenever you pound chicken or any sort of meat, you do wanna make sure you're either putting it in between some sort of a plastic wrap or a parchment paper or wax paper or some sort of plastic bag. Yeah, I didn't do a very good job of this one, but that's okay. When you're staring at the screen and not at what you're doing, maybe that's not the move. But you know what? It doesn't matter because it's just chicken. Or it's just the chicken, it's not the whole recipe, right? Okay. And what you should do, it's fine, I'm gonna throw away this plastic bag anyway, is keep one of your hands clean so you can utilize that. So I'm gonna put my chicken breast evenly, okay, or my chicken breast halves in the bottom of a plastic bag. So you wanna use a plastic bag. You could also use, so this is a gallon size Ziploc bag. You could also use parchment paper. You can use wax paper. You just, to keep it food safe so that you're not spraying chicken stuff all over the place, okay? We wanna put it in some sort of a plastic bag. So I'm gonna go ahead, and because we don't need this anymore, I'm gonna move this. Okay, now that my chicken is in the bag, I'm gonna go ahead and move this off. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. Whoops. The sink that drives me crazy every time. And this was just securing my cutting board. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pound our chicken breast. Now, if you don't have a meat mallet, no worries, you can use anything heavy that you'd be able to crush ice with, essentially. So a heavy bottle of oil works really well. So I could use, as long as it's nice and tightly shut, you can use a bottle of avocado oil. You can use a bottle of wine. You can basically Use anything you've got, especially if it's in the plastic. You're not worrying about it getting anywhere. But this is a meat mallet, and it works the best. And all you're gonna do is just pound that chicken down so it's about even throughout. So I've got the one piece here that I wasn't paying attention. It's a little bit bigger than the other ones. That's fine. It might take just a little bit longer to cook because it's gonna remain a little bit bigger than the other ones. But we want them all just about even. We're just pounding them down. And I'll show you in just a second. It takes a little bit of if you're, you know, like angry about something, this is a really great recipe to make because you're like, that person when I was driving. All right, we're almost there. And then our chicken is nice and pounded. Okay, all we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and take a separate plate. I'm gonna go grab one. And we are gonna go ahead and dredge that chicken. It's helpful to keep it on like parchment paper or wax paper. If you are planning on, I'm just turning my pan on over here. If you're planning on waiting a little bit before you cook it, I'm gonna cook it pretty close to right away. So just so that it stays nice and breaded. So I'm gonna I'll put my plate right there, right in front of me. I've got my breading here, or my dredging flour. And I'm gonna take my thin chicken breast, okay? So now it's pounded nice and thin. This is gonna cook up really quickly. It's still chicken. We still need to cook it the whole way through. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna dredge it. If you haven't done this before, you want some sort of a wide plate or bowl so that when you do go ahead and put your chicken in, it's nice and even. We're gonna put it in on one side, and then we're gonna flip it over and dredge it on the other side. And then we're gonna go ahead, and once it's fully coated, we're gonna go ahead and put that on our plate. I've got my pan turned on right now. And the first thing that we're gonna do with the chicken once it's dredged is we are gonna sear it in some butter and some oil. And if you're just hopping on, the reason we're using butter and oil is because the oil increases the smoke point of the butter so that we can cook with butter without the butter burning, because that's not what we're going for here. Browned butter is delicious in desserts, but not in savory dishes. So we're just making some chicken piccata here. If you are just hopping on, you probably could tell from the title. These are my slightly smaller pieces of chicken over here. Just dredging them in that flour mixture. And if you are just hopping on, because I saw a few people hop on, you can use whatever flour you've got on hand. This is an all-purpose gluten-free flour because we have a gluten-free family member, but you can use whatever sort of flour. You're just using a little bit of it. I do say whatever type of flour, but it will change the texture if you try and use almond or coconut. So I would stick with like an all-purpose type flour. All right. This is a quite small piece of chicken over here. So when you are slicing your chicken, try not to look at a camera. Try and look at what you're doing when you're slicing the chicken. All right, my pan is starting to heat up over here. So now that my chicken is done, I'm just gonna go rinse my hands off real quick, and I'm gonna grab my butter and my oil. Always feel free to throw things around when you're in the kitchen because it makes it more fun. All right, so you want to take about 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of oil. That's what we're going to start with. Just grabbing a regular old butter knife. And we're going to turn our pan up to medium-high. And nope, I'm not measuring the butter because we don't need perfection around here. We're not baking. So I'm just using about a couple tablespoons of butter, and I'm just slicing it to thin pieces so it melts evenly, and a couple tablespoons of avocado oil in the bottom here. So while that's heating up, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get my garlic minced. I did my shallot ahead of time because I needed to use the cutting board, but I'm gonna go ahead and just mince my garlic over here. I'm gonna wipe this off real quick first, just in case, because we need to keep things safe, right? All right, and feel free, you guys, if you have any questions as we go. I am always happy to answer them. There are always pauses in between me cooking, so if you ever have any questions, that is what I'm here for. I do my best to look at them as I go, or if I don't see them as I go, then I always try and look at them at the end. So, all right, let's go ahead and mince our garlic. Okay, you guys have seen my absolute favorite tool for mincing, and that is my microplane. I won't talk about it every time, but I did some stories a while back on my favorite kitchen tools, and I believe I saved it, or some of my favorite kitchen tools, because as much of a minimalist as I am in the kitchen, there are some favorite tools I have, and the microplane is one of them. I think I saved it, and if I didn't, I need to save those stories so you guys can see those, because I do get asked like what my favorite kitchen tools are, and there's just a few, but that's one of them for sure. All right, our butter over here is starting to sizzle, and that's when you know it's about time to put the chicken in. So this garlic is very fresh, which means it's harder to peel, if you guys didn't know that. You can go ahead and just give it a little whack, and that will help to peel it, but if it's a soft piece of garlic, it will break it up into a couple pieces. So, all right, once we start to sizzle over here, or it starts to shimmer, as some chefs will say, it's time to go ahead and sear. So while this is searing, I'm gonna finish the garlic and then squeeze a lemon, and everything else will be done. You can absolutely feel free to mise en place ahead of time. I always recommend mise en place, which is everything in its place, getting everything ready before you go ahead and cook, but I just didn't have the time before. So sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, right? All right, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna sear this chicken because it's ready. We'll finish the garlic and we'll do the lemon juice after, and then everything else is gonna come together very, very quickly. I'm gonna use my hands because I'm washing my hands in between, and I find it's just the easiest tool to get these into the pan. However, you know what? It might not be quite as ready as I wanted it to be. We're gonna give it a second, because you want it to sizzle as soon as you put it in the pan, because we are looking for a nice sear. We want that flour to sear, and we want that chicken to start cooking right away. So because I don't hear that, I'm gonna give it a second, and then you guys can hear it with the second piece of chicken. It's starting to heat up, I can hear it now, but we're gonna give it a second. So let me just rinse my hands. So these are things that you'll come to learn the more comfortable you get in the kitchen. Things like the sound of, oh, okay, that's probably not quite the right temperature for me to sear that. That's fine. No big deal. Doesn't mean you ruined it. Doesn't mean you need to take it off. It'll heat up. It'll sear eventually. But I wouldn't put them all in the pan at once. When that happens, I would give it a minute until it's time. But it sounds pretty good right now. I'm gonna use a set of tongs, another one of my favorite kitchen tools. Yeah, it's not quite there yet, so we'll give it a second. We'll keep peeling our garlic over here. So the whole goal, what you want to be doing with these are huge cloves of garlic. I think I'm going to stick to 3. These are massive. The whole goal, you just want to brown the chicken. So we're going to brown the chicken really well. It's going to turn nice and golden and crispy on the outside. We're going to take it off. We are going to add some more butter and oil. Yes. And we're going to saute the shallots and the garlic. We're going to deglaze it with some white wine. We're going to add the lemon juice to it and the broth, and it's going to create a really delicious pan sauce. At the end, we're going to add those capers and some lemon slices, and it is going to be a beautifully delicious dinner that's going to come together very quickly. You could have some pasta cooking while you're doing this, and it would be a beautiful dinner. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put the other chicken in. That's still taking a second to brown, and that's okay because I did put it in a little bit early. So we're gonna put in another piece of chicken here. And I'm gonna put in the other small piece of chicken, but these are pretty large pieces of chicken, and despite the fact that my pan is pretty big, it's still not quite big enough for 4 of these pieces. So when these are done, I'll add the other one. One of the biggest and most important things when it comes to searing anything, whether you're talking about chicken or steak or mushrooms or peppers or whatever you're cooking that you want to have that nice sear on it. The caramelization when it comes to vegetables, or the Maillard reaction when it comes to meat, you don't want to crowd your pan. If you crowd your pan, then you are going to be steaming whatever it is you're cooking, because any of the liquid that's in that item, another one of those reasons where you want to make sure you pat it dry before you go ahead and cook it. Sorry, I'm washing my chicken as I'm talking to you guys. That's another one of those reasons you want to pat it dry for that really good sear. You definitely want to make sure that you're not crowding the pan, because you don't want to be steaming your chicken. You want to be searing your chicken. We're looking good over here though. I'll show you guys in a sec. I'm just mincing this garlic. Huge pieces of garlic over here. But this is so much easier, in my opinion, than using garlic press, so. All right. That's a lot of garlic, you guys. That's like almost 2 tablespoons of garlic. All right. All right, beautiful. It's starting to turn brown. Okay, this is what we're going for. We don't want our chicken to be black. We want it to start to be nice and golden brown like that. This smaller piece is gonna cook faster than the bigger pieces. And this burner is also not the most efficient burner, so it is what it is. I'm just moving them around to make sure that they are on the heat. That's all I'm doing. We want to leave them. We don't want to touch them because we want them to actually sear. You want to avoid constantly touching the food in your pan, because if it's never actually hitting the heat source, I know it's getting a little bit loud. If it's never actually hitting the heat source, then it's never really going to cook in the way you want it to. So just make sure you're letting it cook. I'm going to turn it down just slightly, and we'll look at it again in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to squeeze this lemon. So I've got a small bowl over here, and I've got a knife, and I'm going to use the juice of 1 large lemon. I already rolled these lemons before, but if you don't know what that means, it's literally just taking your lemon and rolling it, and that's just going to help to get more of the juice out. So feel free to do that ahead of time. And this is my favorite tool for juicing citrus. I'm going to check on the chicken. Where's my... Okay. Okay, beautiful. So good. I'm going to grab 1 more plate. So we're going to cook the chicken for about 4 to 5 minutes per side. I just flipped it over. So this is a beautiful piece of chicken that's cooked. I know it's not, you know, the most beautiful shape, but that is what we were looking for. Nice and golden, but it's not black at all, right? It's just nice and golden. And my other chicken is looking pretty good as well. I just flipped it over. And now that I flipped those over, I'm able to put my other piece of chicken in. I'm gonna grab another pair of tongs for after. We are going to be putting them back in. So they don't have to be 100% done right now. They're going to finish at the end, but we want them to be like 3/4 of the way done. Okay. I don't think I thought about how loud it was going to be with the chicken. I don't know if it's as loud for you guys as it is for me, but the chicken is quite loud over here. Having a party in the pan. All right, so my lemon is juiced. Let's go ahead and gather all of our ingredients so they're ready to go for our next stage of cooking. So our first stage was dredging and searing the chicken. Second stage is creating that pan sauce, and then we'll add the chicken back to it. So we've got the juice of 1 lemon. I'm actually going to slice the other lemon as well. So we'll just go ahead and we're just going to slice it nice and thin. I definitely should have secured my cutting board, but for this, it doesn't really matter. We're just doing nice Thin slices. Nothing fancy. We're not looking to win any awards. We just want delicious chicken. All right. I'm gonna check on this piece, the newer piece of chicken I put in. All right, it's getting pretty golden, but it's not quite there yet. So I just peeked, just looked, and okay, is it golden yet? Nope, so we leave it on for a couple more minutes. This other chicken is looking pretty good. I'm gonna give it another minute or so. The one piece is quite big. So, just gonna give it a second. You're welcome to use a meat thermometer as well to make sure your chicken is 165. Not right now, not until the end when we put it back in, but always use a meat thermometer if you're not confident if your chicken is done. So we're just saving these for the end. I've got my lemon juice. I'm gonna measure out about a 1/4 cup of capers. You can use more or less depending on how much you love capers, but they are traditional in this recipe. I've been asked that before in a cooking class. Can I cook it without capers? You can. Then you just have lemon chicken. It's like lemon garlic chicken. I have to open the... That would have been very strange if I couldn't open the capers. All right. I love capers. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love them. I love olives too. I love anything that's kind of briny. But I know that they are an acquired taste for some. Got our lemon juice, we've got our capers, we've got the rest. We're gonna do a little bit more butter and oil. There we go. All right, so we're flipping over that last piece of chicken. Okay, this chicken's looking pretty good. Just the way it was in the pan. It didn't get as brown throughout as I would have preferred, but you know what? That's okay. It's still delicious and beautifully seared. And this one is about ready to come off as well. It's a lot more even than the other one. So we're just gonna put these aside. This last one I put on. Just gonna be another minute. We've got our shallots, we've got our garlic, and I'm just gonna clean off my cooking space because it is very important to keep a clean cooking space. It's gonna make all of your cooking more efficient. So if you have a break or a pause in between whatever you're cooking, make sure to clean off your space. Anything you don't need, get it out of the way. It really does make a difference. So for those of you guys who were not on live with me or didn't watch the replay last week, I'm gonna have you all vote over in my stories after this Cook with Kris and tell me what kind of, some late spring, summer inspired recipes you want to see next month. So next month will be our last month of doing Cook with Kris on Thursdays until the end of the summer. My husband's sailing schedule gets crazy in May, and so life's just gonna pick up around here. So we're gonna go on break for a little while, and then we're gonna have some fun stuff coming up in the fall. So stay tuned for that. Cooking involved, or stuff involving cooking coming up in the fall. So stay tuned for that. But definitely come over to my stories after this and vote on what you guys want to see for the next few weeks after this. Next week we are doing pasta carbonara, which is one of my absolute favorites, and probably the dish that really truly made me fall in love with cooking. All right, so we've got our pan over here. I'm gonna deglaze with the wine now. I'm gonna add about a 1/4 cup of wine. There's just a lot of flour stuck to the bottom. Some people will make this and they'll add the shallots and the garlic immediately and then deglaze after, but I need some deglazing now. So you're gonna see a lot of steam in just a second. So I'm gonna add about a 1/4 cup of wine to the bottom. And what this is gonna do, and I'm gonna scrape the bottom. So I'm gonna actually get a spatula. And this is gonna get any of that delicious, there we go, it's gonna start to steam. This is gonna get any of that delicious drippings from the chicken. And it is going to just, you can see it. Oh, it's a little bit far. That's because I'm trying not to burn myself. But we're just gonna let this cook down until it's basically dry, and those drippings will become part of the sauce. So I just don't like to put the shallots and the garlic directly onto a pan that hasn't been deglazed, just because it'll just burn it, and I think it's got better flavor if you do it this way. So I'm just gonna let that simmer for a second until almost dry, and that just means it's all evaporated. And yes, whenever you're cooking with wine, as long as you're cooking it long enough, the wine is going to, or the alcohol is gonna evaporate off. So this is always safe to give to kids. As long as you're actually cooking it, you're not like dumping it in at the very end. That doesn't work. But as long as you're simmering it. So I'm just gonna let this simmer for just a second. We're gonna add about another tablespoon of butter and another tablespoon of avocado oil. We're going to saute those shallots and that garlic, and then it's time to add the lemon juice and add the chicken back to it, and it'll be done in no time. And the chicken broth as well to make a sauce. So this comes together probably 30 minutes start to finish. So while the chicken is cooking, rather than me just chatting with you, if you do all your mise en place ahead of time, I got here to the kitchen a little bit late today. But if you do all your mise en place ahead of time, then it's a really good time to get like your vegetables and your pasta or whatever side you want to serve along with your rice, whatever you want to serve along with it together while that chicken is cooking. I'm all about efficiency in the kitchen, so always start what is going to take you the longest first. So if you are going to, cook something that's going to take a little bit longer, say you want to cook up a pot of rice that might take you a little bit longer if you're cooking it on the stove, start that first. Get the chicken going, maybe get the vegetables ready while the chicken's going. The more you start to learn how long things take, the more efficient you'll be able to be, because you can stack things together instead of doing like one thing and then another thing and then another thing. And that is doing the mise en place and then kind of learning how to stack tasks in the kitchen is what makes most chefs so efficient, because you've got to know, how you can actually best use your time in the kitchen. And I think those of us who are busy moms or busy professionals who only have 20 minutes to prepare dinner in the evening, but you want to have a dinner that's got some vegetables, that has a main and a side or two, this can be a really helpful thing for you to learn. And it's something that I teach whenever I teach about meal prep as well. It's why my meal prep is so efficient. It's just because I know how to balance that, and it's something that I love to teach because it is absolutely possible. Okay, so we just have a little tiny bit of liquid left in the pan over here. I'm going to add another tablespoon of butter to the bottom over there, and another tablespoon of avocado oil. And yes, we have already used about 3 tablespoons of butter. It's just that kind of dish, and it's delicious. And I'm just gonna swirl that butter around the bottom over here. And once that's nice and hot in the bottom of the pan, you can probably hear it over there. We're gonna add our shallot. And we're gonna add our garlic, a ton of garlic, but again, you are welcome to use more or less depending on your preference. And I'm just gonna cook that in the bottom of the pan until it's starting to turn translucent, so see-through. I'm going to stir it pretty frequently because we don't want the garlic to burn. But I did turn the heat down just a little bit. So I turned it up nice and high to deglaze the pan. And then I just turned it down once most of that wine was evaporated to about medium-high. Or to about medium, sorry. It was medium-high before. I turned it down to about medium. You want to be gentle with your onions or your shallots and your garlic. You want the flavor, but we don't want to burn the heck out of them. And because the pan is already pretty hot, they are going to, they're going to cook up pretty quickly. And something that you can't see, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and grab a kitchen towel so you guys can see this, because I think you'll find this really helpful. There's a bit of a sauce already forming in the bottom here from what was in the bottom of the pan. So because we've deglazed it, I've got to tap my screen again. Because we've deglazed it, okay, there's a little bit of a sauce forming in the bottom. And I'm just gonna give it one more minute for those shallots and garlic. Probably not actually a minute, probably about 30 seconds if we're gonna be technical, and I need to be technical with you guys so you guys know. There's already that little bit of a sauce forming in the bottom. That's what a pan sauce is. So whatever you use to dredge your meat or whatever it is you're cooking, starts to turn into a sauce with just a little bit of wine, a little bit of broth, which is what we're gonna add next. Some lemon juice. Okay, it's about time. I'm gonna go ahead and add the juice of 1 lemon. If this isn't enough, you can always add more lemon juice when you go ahead and taste it. And I'm gonna add about 1/2 cup of chicken broth. And I wanna add it in now because it is rapidly evaporating. I'm gonna turn it down just a tad more. And I don't have a liquid measure in front of me, so we're gonna use a dry measure, but nobody come at me, I know it's a dry measure. It doesn't really matter for this recipe. Okay. I wanted to add that chicken broth right away because I don't want it to evaporate so much that we don't have any sauce left, okay? So we added that lemon juice. As soon as that sauce started to form in the bottom, I've got the shallots and the garlic. We added the lemon juice, which does a little bit more of a deglaze there. We've got chicken broth in the bottom here, and I will go ahead and show it to you guys. I'm gonna move it over a little bit closer. I wish it could be closer to me, but I also have to keep my own safety in mind. All right, we can keep it there. So there's not a ton of liquid in the bottom over here. We have probably, it's probably about 1/2 cup of liquid in the bottom of here right now, and our shallots and our garlic are pretty much cooked now in the bottom there, so they're really small pieces, so it's a pretty smooth sauce. It's a little bit thick thanks to the dredging on the chicken in the bottom, and all we're gonna do is we're just gonna let it simmer for about another 30 seconds, just so a little bit of that liquid evaporates. It thickens up a little bit, and then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add the chicken back to it. We're gonna add the capers first. We're gonna add the chicken back to it, and I like putting the lemon slices on top. And if you would like, you can cover it for a couple minutes. I like keeping the chicken pretty crispy, so I prefer to not cover it. And you're just gonna cook it until the chicken is cooked. And since the chicken's been pounded pretty thin, this one piece is pretty big, but it's already mostly cooked, right? We're about 3/4 of the way cooked. It's gonna come together in just a couple of minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and add those capers to the bottom. And notice that aside from seasoning the chicken and seasoning the dredging, and yes, there's a little bit of salt in the chicken stock, I'm just gonna let this simmer for another maybe 30 seconds because the capers do have a little bit of liquid in them. We are not adding any salt because, as I always say, we want our food to be well seasoned but not salty. It's important to use enough salt that your food is flavorful, but if we use too much, then our food just tastes like salt. It doesn't actually taste flavorful, and the delicious flavors of the lemon and the shallot and the garlic and the capers, they are the stars of this recipe. So let's go ahead. It looks beautiful over here. Let's add our chicken back in. We're gonna use the new tongs because these tongs we used on the raw chicken. So we're just gonna nestle that chicken down in the bottom, especially this slightly bigger piece of chicken. They're still pretty thin, way thinner than your typical chicken breast. But we're just gonna kind of nestle that chicken in. And now that the chicken's a bit smaller, all 4 pieces can fit in. Remember I told you in the very beginning that we wanna make sure that we are not crowding the pan. It's already seared, so it's totally fine at this point. So now the chicken is in there. And we are just gonna let that go ahead and simmer for a couple minutes. I'm gonna add some of those lemon slices on top. If you wanted to, I don't like that one. It's too thick. If you wanted to, you can save some fresh lemons for the bottom, but I love adding the lemons right on top at this point in cooking, just because they start to cook ever so slightly. They just get to be warmed a little bit. They steam a little bit. And you could eat the lemon if you wanted to. You're not going to eat the lemon necessarily, but it does infuse a little bit of that flavor into it. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this poor one larger chicken breast over here just keeps getting pushed. I keep putting it in the wrong spot in the pan. It's just not hot enough where it was. It needs to cook. It's okay to talk to your food. It likes it. It's like plants, right? I don't know. I can't keep plants alive. I have a total of 2 plants I've actually kept alive inside my house. I can keep herbs alive outside of my house. That's about it. I have a snake plant. If you ever see me chatting in like the part of my living room that is my office, that guy's been alive for several years now, and I have a cactus. It's like this big. Food I can do. I'm not so sure about plants. I leave that to my dad. He's got a beautiful garden over there. All right. It is looking beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it down really low because we are just about done over here. My bigger chicken breast probably needs another couple of minutes to cook, but I'm gonna go ahead and show it to you guys right now. I'm gonna show you what it looks like because it's looking beautiful. And the smaller pieces, they're done. The nice thing about this cooking method is that you can take them out and when the smaller pieces are done and just set them aside and let the larger pieces continue to cook, and the liquid is going to keep it all very moist. So let me show you what this looks like right now, and then I'm gonna put it on a plate and I will share that with you guys. So see that beautiful, delicious pan sauce you created in the bottom there? Can you see that? It's a little bit, it's a little bit hard to tell right now. It's a little bit hard to tell when I'm kind of sharing it with you like that, but let's go ahead and put it on a plate. Now, if I were serving dinner right now, I'm not because it's 2:45 in the afternoon, but if I were serving dinner right now, I would serve this alongside some pasta that was really, really simply cooked with probably a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and some broccolini sauteed with probably a little bit of garlic because we love garlic in this house. Okay. Our beautiful chicken piccata is done. Look at how beautiful that is. Look at that delicious sauce over the top. I really got to turn this off though because this sauce is going to, it's going to disappear on me soon. All right, friends, I hope you guys will go ahead and make it. I will put the full recipe in my stories after this, and please go ahead and vote on what you guys want to see. Next week, we're going to do pasta carbonara. It's another recipe that's also really easily made gluten-free if you use gluten-free pasta. And the week after, we are going to jump into our last month of these Thursday Cook with Kris for a little while. So vote for what you guys want to see. We're going to do some seafood because we haven't done a lot of seafood. So there's a bunch of seafood options. So let me know what you guys want to see. All right, friends, have a beautiful Thursday. I will see you guys next week, same place, same time, and happy cooking. Share with me if you make this recipe. I want to see how you made it. All right, friends.